it's all our mind. Sometimes we kind of look at something like hypnosis or hypnotherapy, and we think that it's some strange thing that we're doing. But actually, the word hypnosis I think it's a poor name for it. It's hypnos is the Greek god of sleep. So it's not sleep. We're not sleeping. What we're doing is we are trying to focus the mind. So, but the beauty of it all is it's all within the mind. The mind is doing all the work. And the best thing I can do is to be a facilitator, to guide a little bit and to prompt, but to let the mind do the work. Whether that's the experience or whether the healing that it needs to do or the resolving of its conflicts between a part of the mind thinking that anxiety is a good emotion for sitting in a crowd of people against another part of the mind that is saying isn't the way I should be feeling. This is actually interfering with my happiness, my joy, my experience of being out with friends. So it's try to help the mind to resolve its conflict by bringing the conflicting parts together. So it really is. The power and the strength is all within our mind, and I think that's what's so good about this is that nobody knows our minds better than ourselves. So it's about using the mind, the person's own mind. It knows what all the problems are. It generates the problems. It's responsible for the problems. So if we want to resolve anything, go to the thing that actually created the problem, or because it will have the solution as well. It knows how you want to be, what you want to experience, what you need to experience. So it's a facilitation, really.
Welcome to today's episode of Unleash Thyself. I am your host, Konstantin Morun, and today I'm delighted to introduce you to Stephen Towill, a highly skilled hypnotherapist based in Scotland. With years of experience and several professional qualifications, Stephen specializes in the intriguing and often misunderstood field of past life regression and between lives spiritual hypnosis. In today's episode, we're diving deep into the world of hypnotherapy and hypnosis. Stephen will demystify what past life regression is and the benefits that can come from exploring our previous lives. We'll also look at how hypnosis is not a form of mind control. You are fully in control during the process, and Stephen is just a facilitator, guiding your mind to do its work. We'll debunk some of the fears surrounding hypnosis and why it's vital to understand that our subconscious mind is always active, always listening. And for those of you curious about the notion of in-between lives or even future life progression, we'll tap into those topics as well. Is this all a figment of our imagination? Well, you'll have to tune in to find out. Stephen's insights and techniques offer a window into an alternative form of therapy that holds the promise of not just healing, but profound personal insight. So, if you're looking to delve into the deeper layers of our subconscious, having a desire to unlock mysteries from past or even future lives, or seeking an alternative path to emotional and spiritual well-being, you won't want to miss today's episode. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Unleash Thyself. I am thrilled to welcome Stephen Towill to the show. Stephen, we can't wait to hear more about the experiences and insights that have led you to where you are today and your unleashed moment, the moment you knew you are on your own path to becoming the best version of yourself. Stephen, such a pleasure to have you with us.
Yeah, welcome to. Thanks to have me. Yeah, thank you.
So, Stephen, you are right now today a hypnotherapist specializing in past life regression. How does one get to do what you do, and what made you jump into it?
It's something that I've been interested in most of my life. I'm a big believer in following your passions. And for me, most of the passions that I had when I was young, which hypnosis was one of them, I had a big curiosity about it. I've been lucky enough and it's been with me since I've been pretty young. It's about probably 13 is when I first remember taking an interest in it.
Okay. And has your path taken you to hypnotherapy right out of school, let's say, after high school, or?
No, I had a bit more of so I was an accountant. So I was an accountant for quite a number of years, but it was probably in the last 5 or 6 years that I decided to go self-employed, to make it my full-time career. So it was always there in the background and I was always still doing it, but it was, I guess it was the leap of faith that this was what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that's a great reminder of once you go back to your passions, to the root of it, right, to what makes your heart sing and follow your heart, you cannot look back. And why do you think you went down more of a traditional path with accountant and not jumping right into what your passion was, which was a mix of music and, of course, the hypnosis?
It's that social conditioning, I suppose, that when I left school, it was okay, you need to find a job. From where I am, and probably most places in the world, you're not really encouraged to be someone who might be someone that's goes and finds their own way in the world. It was really you leave school, you find a job, and even being an accountant, it wasn't even what I wanted to do. I went to college before then as well, and that wasn't what I studied. But I guess my path took me in that direction. I've always been someone that's went with the flow. So, that job put me in a good position. It was a good job. It was a decent paid job, and I guess when it came to that leap of faith and to do what I'm doing, it gave me a sort of financial and secure background to do it. So it played its part, I guess, in my path.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's how it usually goes. And what would you say the biggest catalyst was for you to finally follow your passion?
It was like a flow. It was just that interest in it, that passion, that love for it. I was always really curious, even as a child when I was maybe 17, 18, when I learned actually how to hypnotize for the first time. It was my 6-year-old brother, funnily enough, who I did. It was the first subject that I ever worked with, and my first ever past life regression that I did with him as well. It was just this real curiosity about the unknown. What is hypnosis? How does it work? How can you see stage hypnosis and you see people doing all these weird and wonderful things that they don't seem to really know that they're doing it? And so that sort of piqued my curiosity, and it remained the passion, just like other things like art. I've always been a creative person, so arts and music and all these things were where I was really good at, and how I found. It was even, I guess, self discovery. I was never really great at certain things at school, but the creative side of it was what I was really good at. And even as an accountant, it was, I guess, it was my ability to look at systems and how they could be done better, and ideas to improve things. So I've always had this kind of creative and curious mind, and it seems to have led me down these paths that I do now.
That's amazing, Stephen. And let's, I guess, go back to the hypnotherapy for a second with the past life regression. For those that are listening to us right now, and most people know what hypnotherapy is, but not everyone has heard about past life regression or may not even know what it is. Can you tell us a bit more about how you see past life regression?
Yeah, so first of all, it's a phenomena. It's something that maybe came out of hypnosis where people have worked in a regressional way where they may ask someone to go back to the root of where they started feeling an anxiety or a fear of something. And the phenomena in some cases is when people start just to just describe this completely different life. Often, if it's a fear of drowning, for instance, it may be that they drowned in the past life. So it's a sort of phenomena that seems to sit within these unconscious elements of our mind. So hypnosis helps to bring it forward. And the way that I see what it is, it's almost the accumulation of who we are. So if you think about, for instance, all your years that you attended school, now you probably can't remember probably 90%, 90, maybe even 95% of every single day that you went to school and what happened in that day, what lessons did you learn, and how you even learned some of the things. It's became, but I guess we've accumulated the learning, the understanding, the knowledge, the way to read and write. So it now becomes just part of what we are, even though we can't remember everything about it. And past life, I think, is something similar. Again, it's not really prevalent in our current life. So it's not something that we need to maybe remember because we're too busy living this life. But it sits there at this unconscious level, just like perhaps all the experiences of the rest of your life that you don't really remember. And hypnosis helps to bring these things forward. But they're all playing out. They're still, like we said, it's the accumulation of all these lives that we've lived before. We carry some deeper understanding of how we're good at coping in certain circumstances, how some people are maybe more naturally good at certain things. So my perception is it's the accumulation, it's of what we are and who we are.
Okay, that's a great explanation there, Stephen. So you mentioned that sometimes people do past life regression because they're looking to cure an anxiety or something similar to that. What are other benefits of one coming to you and saying, you know what, let's do a past life regression. Like we'll go back, we'll see different lives we lived. What are some benefits that we can bring back with us or learn?
There's many different ways to work with the mind. So we can use hypnotherapy to resolve fear or a phobia. Past life regression is just another way that potentially, if we use regression, it may even be in this life. So to go in to try and find the why we're acting or reacting in certain ways just by using a past life regression, it may not be a past life that it comes from. So hypnotherapy can really work on all these, whether it's past life, current life, whatever. It's part of the mind and it's a way of working on it. But the benefits of past life, I guess, are that it's a curious thing. I mean, everybody probably, well, there's a lot of people probably wonder, well, if this is a thing, what would I have been? Who would I have been? But the benefits that it can bring, I guess, is if we do carry some phobia or some fear, it may be a fear of flying, it may be a fear of drowning, it may be I don't know, fear of certain animals or something. And it may be that from that past life, this is where we sort of developed it. So it's about going back to find where this phobia, this fear came from, and the past life regression can help us to then release that fear, knowing that I guess it's not a useful fear in this current life, but also resources. So it may be that I've had clients that have been shown a couple of different lives, and one may be that they've had a really hard and difficult life. I mean, there's one that sticks in mind where they were a woman who apparently was ugly, never married, had a horrible job, and never really sounded like a pretty miserable life, to be honest. But then was shown this other life where they were very, very nice, settled, and happy, nice family, nice position in the sort of town that they lived. But what the message, and again, this would come into another area, which is more the spiritual side of it, which is what I call the between lives, so this more spiritual experience where we may get more understanding of why we were shown these past lives. And the message here was it really just said, well, the life that you had that was really pleasant, nice family, you probably didn't learn a lot from that life. But that difficult life where you had to face all those challenges and difficulties, even though it was hard and challenging, you gained a lot of strength and probably. So what it was saying was it's not always the easiest path that gives you greatest learning. And that was the message for that particular client. So I guess it's showing that, and so that it really it was maybe giving some kind of indication of whatever it was they were going through in their current life. This is your experience of what happened before, but it could be resources as well, things that abilities, and maybe that you're struggling with something, and it's almost like, well, this is what you've dealt with before. This you've already got that developed skill. You shouldn't be worrying maybe as much about what you're going through now because you're actually stronger maybe than what you actually believe or that you think you are. So it can be a bit of a healing, bit of an understanding or a sort of awareness of more about what we are and who we are.
Yeah. So almost like a reminder of certain things, like you said, that maybe we've forgotten from our school years. And in this case, of course, it's our past lives
Yeah.
that we can bring into this life. Yeah. So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's like I can add up, I can do multiplication, I can spell, I can write, but I don't remember really. I've got one memory of sitting, a very early memory sitting, looking at a blackboard and reading some letters. I've got a vague memory of that, but that's as close as I can remember. But yet here I can speak fluently, I can talk, I can write, and so I don't need to remember it. It's just that developed ability that is part of what I am now.
Hey, it's Konstantin here, and I want to take a brief moment to truly thank you for being a part of this incredible journey of transformation. You are the reason we are creating this content. I see you and I appreciate you. Your support truly means the world to me. I want to ask you for a small favor. I'd love for you to join our mission by hitting like, subscribe, or leaving a thoughtful comment or review. Your engagement helps others discover these insights, and together we can continue to unlock the power of authenticity and personal transformation. And if you want to reach out directly to me, send me an email at konstantin@unleashthyself.com. I value any and all feedback. Thank you for being a part of this movement. Now, back to the episode. Yeah, sometimes that's all we need, the reminder that we have those abilities within ourselves.
Yeah.
So when it comes to past life regression, is it that anyone that can undertake hypnosis can go back and can see? or can experience some of those past lives, or is it also specific to the individual and their willingness to allow you?
So I guess the human mind is so different and so diverse. So there is some people that can struggle a little bit. Now, when I started studying clinical hypnotherapy, working more just with mindset and mental health, I did that really to try and figure to maybe increase and to make my abilities with hypnosis better, to learn more about it. So I thought that would be a good path to take to try and develop my hypnosis skills. And one of the reasons I did that was really to try and I recognize that there are some people that just can't, they don't seem to sort of respond as well as other people. So it's a bit of a spectrum. Some people are just amazing. It's like they're there and they're experiencing it. Other people struggle. So there's a bit of a spectrum on it, but you can find, from what my understanding and what I've learned, is there can be various different factors that contribute towards someone maybe struggling. One could be a deep rooted fear. It may just be that they worry about the process. They think that it's some kind of mind control, which it technically isn't. It's actually more of a facilitation to help someone discover more about their mind. They maybe take that from a stage hypnosis where it looks like someone's telling you what to do and you've got no control over that. So there can be a deep-rooted fear that may sort of stop you from doing it. It could be certain people who are quite a controlling person, that they don't like, they want to be in control, and they may resist some sort of way, thinking that maybe you're doing something that they've got no control over. So again, someone that can be quite controlling may struggle a little bit. But do you know what I've seen? I've had clients that say, to come to me and say, well, that control, and analytical people are another type of people that can sometimes struggle. But again, I've had people that say these things and then they come and then they have a really good session. So it's hard to sort of know really. There just seems to be a sort of spectrum on it. And there is just some people that do amazing. Most people are in the middle somewhere, and then you get the odd people that seem to just struggle, possibly at multiple reasons. One of the ones I've found can be quite difficult is forget what the condition is, but maybe some people with certain, I guess, labels on their mind, like Asperger's or something like that. These sort of people, they have a very, I guess, unique mind, which has its strengths in itself, but sometimes they can struggle. They're quite black and white thinking, some people. So it's hard to sort of really pinpoint, but there is a bit of a mixture of, or a spectrum, I think is the best word to sort of describe it, of how people do within sessions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like anything else in life, right? Sometimes you have to try it to see if it's for you and if it works for you.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, Stephen. I actually did my first hypnotherapy session maybe a month and a half ago now, and I didn't know what to expect going in, but all I did is I had an open mind. And I'm someone that's a bit more controlling. I'm someone that has an analytical mind, like you're describing. It wasn't difficult.
Yeah.
Past the first few minutes, right, where your brain is like, "What are we doing? Why are we doing this?"
Yeah. That's it. It's the best way to approach it. Just go in and see. That's what I say that to a lot of people. Just go in and see what happens. The worst thing you can do is put pressure on yourself, and that's the analytical part of the mind that might start to question things. Am I making this up? Is this just da 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 da? I explain it sometimes. Like, have you ever seen, maybe say a mother takes a little kid for the day, so the kid's maybe 3 years old or something, and she meets her friend and they're having a conversation. But then the little kid decides he wants something, so he's run up, "Mummy, can I get this? Can I get sweets? Can I get that?" And the woman's trying to have a conversation, and she'll turn around and she'll be like, "Can you stop? I'm trying to have a conversation." And it's impossible to have that communication because of this distraction. And that's a little bit like sometimes with this conscious awareness, conscious mind, this critical mind, is, "Am I making this up? Is this just imagination?" Da, 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 da. And and it's sort of interfering, it's getting in the way of the communication with the kind of unconscious type part of the mind you're trying to tap into. So the best thing you can, I always say, is just push that away. It's a bit like people that meditate. There's some people will say it's trying to just get that stillness, that silence. The thing about hypnosis is it's a state of focus. We're trying to focus the mind. So whether we're trying to focus the mind to some part of the mind that is creating an anxiety or a fear, or whether it's trying to focus the mind to recall some sort of past life, it's all about focus. And if the mind is focused too much on thoughts and other things, questions it's asking, then it's detracting from its ability to focus on these other parts that we're trying to get to.
You're absolutely right, because I remember my mind was doing exactly that, especially at the beginning. And as it got deeper, I'd be like questioning, is like, how is this real? How does this work? And I'll be honest with you, it was one of the strongest experiences of my life. And I've tried many things in my life. So for this to be at the top, it has to be really good. And it was.
And the beauty that it's all our mind. Sometimes we kind of look at something like hypnosis or hypnotherapy, and we think that it's some strange thing that we're doing. But actually, the word hypnosis I think it's a poor name for it. It's hypnos is the Greek god of sleep, so it's not sleep. We're not sleeping. What we're doing is we are trying to focus the mind. So but the beauty of it all is it's all within the mind. The mind is doing all the work. And the best thing I can do is to be a facilitator, to guide a little bit and to prompt, but to let the mind do the work. Whether that's the experience or whether the healing that it needs to do or the resolving of its conflicts between a part of the mind thinking that anxiety is a good emotion for sitting in a crowd of people against another part of the mind that is saying isn't the way I should be feeling. This is actually interfering with my happiness, my joy, my experience of being out with friends. It's try to help the mind to resolve its conflict by bringing the conflicting parts together. So it really is. The power and the strength is all within our mind, and I think that's what's so good about this is that nobody knows our minds better than ourselves. So it's about using the mind, the person's own mind. It knows what all the problems are. It generates the problems. It's responsible for the problems. So if we want to resolve anything, go to the thing that actually created the problem, or because it will have the solution as well. It knows how you want to be, what you want to experience, what you need to experience. So it's a facilitation, really.
That's such a beautiful explanation, Stephen. I love that. And I love the message of the fact that you have the answers within and you are the person that can heal yourself, make that happen. It's just sometimes you need a bit of help. Like you said, you need a facilitator, maybe a method that allows you to go in and heal those parts or remove those fears and anxieties. So that's really beautiful. And I would imagine that's more the clinical hypnotherapy side of it, right? Like that's if I want to work on, let's say, an anxiety or maybe my inner child, something that a trauma from my childhood, I would imagine that's more of the clinical hypnotherapy side. And then if it cannot be solved through that, then you look at past life regression. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes and no. That is a big factor of the clinical side, how I work. Even in the same way, with past life regression, I try not to be too, what's the word for it, directive, to be too sort of suggestive in where I want to go. So a lot of the time, the person probably comes with, if they've booked a past life regression, then that's what they want to experience. So they probably already carry a suggestion that that's what they'll experience. But what I try to do is not to be too directive. So it's just a case of allow the mind to go to where it needs to go to. And it's amazing. See, the less I do, for some reason, the more powerful the session. It's almost like with the past life. It's like I said, there was that woman who experienced two different lives. One was a man, one was a woman, and the two different lives. There was a message behind it all towards her current life, but these two lives actually helped her to realize what it was that she needed to know. And it was almost like the mind knew exactly where it had to show her. Some part somewhere, higher self or whatever it is, knew exactly what had to happen in that experience to help that person. So again, it's even in these circumstances, it's the mind almost knows what it needs to do. So let the mind lead the way almost.
Yeah, exactly. That's a beautiful way to approach it. And one question I have, and this is more for people in the audience than myself. So my experience with hypnotherapy, the session I did, it didn't start very visual, but it became very visual the deeper we went. Are visuals something that most people can expect when they go deep into therapy and past life regression, or is it a combination of visions, feelings, emotions, and pretty much the gamut?
Yeah, so that's a good point. We use these communication systems, visual, kinesthetic, which is feeling, and auditory. So there are our three main communication systems. We've also got other senses, which are smell and taste, which I think fall under kinesthetic. But so we've got these three communication systems. Now, there's some figures on it, and I can't remember the source of the figures, but it's something like 6% of people are primarily auditory. And I think it's something like 40 something is maybe, it's a low 40s, I think, for kinesthetic, but a higher one, the visual. So there's more visual people, but that doesn't mean that we can use all of them. I mean, there's some people even recall smells and some past life regressions and things as well. But there are three communication systems. So, like you said, you may go into a session and you don't visualize very well. Now, it's quite important for me to explain that in a pre-talk, because if someone has maybe their visual communication isn't developed as well, it's not their primary, but they're very strong in the kinesthetic, they can go into an experience not visualizing something. So there's that part of the mind going, okay, this isn't working. I can't see anything. I'm expecting to see something, but nothing. So I've had amazing sessions with people who have went to other people and said it doesn't work for them. But I realized they were very kinesthetic, and I actually worked with more of the kinesthetic. What do you feel? What do you know? What you're aware of, rather than what do you see? And that's quite a kind of key thing. And success is really the person determining that it's not always just about visualizing. But what we say, we do have these other senses. So you were able to sort of maybe become more visual within the session. So again, it's a one of these sort of things that's a bit of a spectrum. You get very, very visual people that are there and they're living this life. And then there's other people that they don't see it very well. It's a bit maybe even fuzzy, but they get a kind of general understanding of what's happening and what's going on. So yeah, that's a key part actually. It's about how we can even tell. I mean, this is stuff that comes out of a lot of NLP. Do a lot of stuff with this, with the visual, the kinesthetics, so neuro linguistic programming. For anyone that doesn't know, it's another sort of developed way of working with the mind. This ties to a lot of hypnotherapy and things. So they can really look at this visual, kinesthetic, auditory as the communication systems, and you'll hear it in language. So someone who is highly visual may say things. So you might say to them, tell me about that problem. And they'll say, well, the way I'm looking at it at the moment is that it's X, 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 and I can see what you've been saying, but I seem to have a different perspective and I'm looking at it maybe in a different way. So they're saying things like the way I see it, the way I look at it, or the way you look at it. They're using visual words. Whereas a kinesthetic person maybe talking about, it just feels like a weight on my shoulders, like I'm trudging through mud. So again, they'll maybe be using more kinesthetic words. And the same, some of the primary auditory might be saying things like, I hear what you're saying, but it sounds to me like it's. So again, you can hear it in language. The words that people use sort of can often determine what sense, I guess, is more primary with them.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. I never thought of it that way. Very, very interesting. And I know you mentioned a minute ago or so that one of the fears that people have coming into doing a hypnotherapy is losing control, right? And that's, of course, something that was on my mind as well. But one thing I didn't realize even going in is that you're actually in control the entire time.
Yeah.
As a person having hypnotherapy done to you. And I would imagine there's a case with you as well. And most people that practice hypnotherapy, right? You're not essentially mind controlling the person, like you mentioned earlier, right? It's all about the subject being in full control.
Yeah, that's the best way. I mean, there is highly suggestible people, and that's the type of people that stage hypnotists will be looking for. So if you've ever seen a stage show for hypnosis, they'll maybe get all these volunteers to come up. They'll probably do all these little tests, the suggestibility tests, which are getting people's hands to stick together and things. So they're looking for certain types of people. So again, it's a spectrum idea that there is certain people that are very accommodating, maybe, or more sort of open to the experience, whereas there may be someone sitting going on, I don't want to go up there. There's not a chance I want to go up there. I'll never go up there. And if my hands stick together, I might not even do it because I don't want to go up there. So their people are absolutely, the hypnotherapist will send them back because they're not going to work. They're going to resist. They're going to they'll have a lot of resistance and they won't have a good show. So as you're saying, it's as much as, even though there are these people that are doing these things, they're still kind of aware of it. And if they wanted to, they can just leave that stage and go back to their chair if they don't want to partake in that show. And it's the same with hypnosis, is you're always in control. If you want to open your eyes, you open your eyes. And an old concept as well, some people used to say, was, what if I can't wake back up? I don't get that as much as I used to a long time ago. But again, it's as try to explain that is that you're in control. If you want to open your eyes, you open your eyes. If the internet goes down, then my voice will disappear. And all you do is you open your eyes to find out why is that disappeared. It's not like in 3 weeks' time you're still sitting there in front of a blank screen just in some disappeared trance somewhere. So you're still aware, you're still conscious. The best way to describe it, I say to a lot of people, is it's a bit like a daydream. A daydream, you're there and you're sort of aware, but you're somewhere else as well. And that's the best way to describe it. But you can just snap straight back out whenever you want to. So yeah, I always say it's a facilitation rather than a control.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that explanation, Stephen. And you mentioned earlier as well, it's about getting the brain out of the way so you can work with the subconscious, both you as a facilitator and of course the person that's getting the hypnosis done to them. And speaking of the unconscious or the subconscious, you do mention this, and I've seen it on your website, that the unconscious or the subconscious is always listening. What do you mean by that?
When you think about conscious and subconscious, to start with, or unconscious, they're models of how our minds work. So we don't actually have a conscious part of the mind and an unconscious part. It's a way of looking at how the mind works. So to describe how the unconscious or the subconscious, maybe I'll explain that a little bit more about what that. Look at me at the moment, right? I'm going to freeze all my muscles, everything. I'm going to just show you that why are my hands there? I don't know why my hands are up here. Why aren't they sitting down there? Some part of my mind, they're doing it again, they're moving around. Some part of my mind has decided, and it's better knowledge, wisdom, that I can communicate to you better by moving my hands. I can feel my face moving around a little bit as well, facial expressions. So there's all these things kind of happening unconsciously, but probably for some reason. So in terms of how the unconscious is always listening. So to give you an example, let's say you were sitting in a bar or a pub and you were sober and you weren't drinking, but everybody else was. And I don't know if there's probably most people have experienced this where probably okay for the first hour, 2 hours, but the drunker people get, the more they start to ramble, they repeat the story, they get louder, they're all talking over each other. So if you were sitting there sober, you would be probably getting into some little trance. You're probably sitting, maybe even thinking about, I wonder what time I can go home at, or maybe should stay for a little bit longer. So you are, again, it's that focus. You're focused away from that conversation. But they may say, well, what do you think about it, Constantine? And look back. And you've been out of it a little bit, but at some level you've still been listening. The unconscious mind, this unconscious element of the mind is taking in so much information. So you may have even caught some of that conversation while you were drifting away a little bit, and you may be able to kind of recollect and say, and just as it's always listening, it's always seeing, it's always feeling. So it's not just the auditory element of always listening; it's doing them all. And another example of that could be you walking down a street. Now you might start to sweat, and it's because the temperature is getting really, really warm. Now you might at some point become consciously aware that you have started to sweat, but what was it why did it start to sweat in the first place? Your unconscious mind was aware of the temperature, and it had decided that your body had to try and cool down a little bit. So it starts to process these physical reactions. It could be also that you're walking down and a car passes by and someone says, what color was that? I have no idea. But your unconscious mind and its peripheral vision would have took in that color. So there's so many things going around us at the one time. Right, there's a stat on this as well. And I think it's that so again, it's this model of conscious and unconscious, but the unconscious or subconscious mind is supposed to be aware of 11 million bits of information. And apparently it chunks them up into 2 million chunks of information every second. Whereas the conscious mind is only aware of 7 plus or minus 2 things at one time. So your conscious mind can only be aware of a couple of things. Whereas your unconscious mind, like we're saying, taking the temperature, taking in the sounds, there may be children playing over in the distance and the dog barking somewhere. Your mind is taking all this in. So that's I guess that's what it means by it's always listening. It's always there in the background doing much more than what we probably even comprehend.
And in my mind, that also means that that's why we have access to so much information within. We just can't necessarily access to, stay in stillness, like you said, listen, maybe go into hypnosis to be able to tap into some of that knowledge
Yeah.
that was absorbed, but we forgot.
And that's why hypnosis is so good, because, like we said, it's a state of focus. It's focusing the mind, helping the mind to get by this critical thinking and to focus in on other aspects. So I guess it's the critical mind can be the block. In fact, there's a guy called Professor Ian Stevenson, a Canadian. I think he was actually from Scotland originally, but he lived in Canada, and he studied past life regression. It was actually past life recall in children. That was his big thing. He was with this Professor Ian Stevens. One of the things that he said was that it seems to be around about 7 that children will stop talking about the past life. So this is another common thing, that a lot of children will speak about their other life, their other mum, their other dad, when I used to live in that other place. So it's a common thing for a lot of children to sort of say these things. But he says that around about 7 is when they start fade. Now, there's another interesting study by a guy called Piaget, a Swiss psychologist, I think he was, and he was actually involved in the Mensa. He was one of the assistants on the Mensa, developing the Mensa test, but he did a lot of cognitive sort of development studies, and I think it's the pre-construct, do they call it, which is between 2 and 7 years old, is when the mind hasn't fully developed its ability to what's right and wrong, making choices and things. So again, it's almost like as we get past that age of 7, 8, 9, our minds start to determine more of a constructed perception of things, which rates. Whereas before that, the mind is much more open. So it's almost like as we get older, our minds close to more constructed ideas, whereas before that, the mind's like a sponge, because it's trying to learn to adapt in its environment. It's trying to learn how to survive. It'll be taking even generational traumas and issues from its parents, because it needs to survive. It needs to adapt into its environment, and who better to learn from are the people closest to you who seem to have already did that. So that's why we take on a lot of other people's parents, for instance, beliefs and behaviors, all because at that age of 7, our minds were like a sponge, learning so much. In fact, it's supposed to be it's a hyper state of learning. There's things that we can only do at that age that we can't do later in life. For instance, one example is perfect pitch. For anybody to recognize each note without, so that's a C, that's a C sharp, that's a G, and they can sing these notes perfectly. That apparently is impossible to learn when you're older, but at a younger age, when the mind's still developing, that's where you can learn this. So for anyone that wants to teach their kids perfect pitch, or to have perfect pitch, give them complex music to listen to, whether it's classical music, jazz music, and even a lot of in Asia, there's a lot of kids with perfect pitch. And one of the ideas that I heard was that the reason for that is that if you think a language like Mandarin is very phonetical, it's quite a complex sounding. Like ours is very monotone, whereas a Mandarin one's quite rich, the way that they speak. I will not insult anybody that speaks Mandarin by trying to give you an example of it, but it's very up down. It goes all over the place, the Mandarin sort of tone.
It's a good example with the children, right? Because I mean, that also explains why we pick up so many things that were not necessarily told to us, right? Because, like you said, there's something you can pick up visually, but also feelings, emotions, right? And that stays with you and that forms up your life.
Yeah.
And then that's how you have your traumas and anxiety, even if, let's say, it wasn't a bad trauma to begin with. And bad is very relative, because something that's bad for me might not be bad for you, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's a really good way of looking at it. And I know that one of the things that is really interesting to me when it comes to past life regression, it's not something I've done yet, but I'm really curious to explore, is this idea of the experience of in-between lives, or in-between life states. And that's a concept that I didn't really think about initially, but can we talk a bit more about what's this in-between lives that people talk about?
Yeah, I call it between lives. There was a guy called Dr. Michael Newton, wrote some really good books. I think one was Journey of Souls, one was Destiny of Souls. So he studied something like 7,000 test cases over his career. He sort of moved into past life regression didn't really believe in it. But for some reason, people struggling with certain issues, and I think it was an accidental, that someone regressed to a past life and resolved this issue that they seem to have. He coined it life between lives. So I guess it comes from an idea that we're born into this life, then we die, and we go somewhere else, and then we come back into another life. So the between lives, or the life between lives, is this, I guess, this in between place where, now, from all his studies, all these people were saying the same things, which was that there is soul groups, soul families, that we all come together, and this is a common thing through past life, is that your mother in that life could be your brother in this life. So it's almost like souls take different roles in our lives to learn whatever it is we're here to learn. And that's pretty much what came out of the Michael Newton work, was that we're here at learning. We're here for a learning purpose. Each life will provide us with the experiences that we need to, I guess, expand, or to gain ascension, knowledge, whatever. So each life will provide that. So this between life seems to be the place where we would be planning these lives, where we're energetic, so we're not physical people. So I guess it's this whole spiritual aspect. The way I like to look at it is we don't necessarily die. So again, it comes back to something like focus again that we can talk about. We'll live in this life, but for me, if you actually look at the world that we live in, it's an energetic construct. It's not. If you start to look at atoms, and atoms are the building blocks of all matter, apparently, but then when you look to an atom, it's got 99% of space, and then within there's a nucleus, which, if you look in there, protons and neutrons. Within that again is the quark. Quarks don't have size, mass, so they're events that appear and disappear. We don't know where they disappear to. They reckon to different dimensions or something. But so really, that's what our constructed universe is this energetic thing that doesn't seem to have physical matter. Even physical is the magnetic repulsion of negative charged electrons that give us this impression of touch. Or my two fingers at the moment, if I zoom in on them, they don't actually touch. There's still a space between them, but it's the negative charged electrons of each repelling. So if you look at the world from that perspective, it's not quite what we believe it to be. It's like a horse with a set of blinkers. We are in a very narrow focus of experience, living this life at the moment for experience, going through the dramas of the life and being challenged in certain ways for us to overcome those challenges and to be a better person, to be a stronger person. So each life provides the lessons. The between life is when we expand back out. It's like, rather than dying, I think it's more that we wake back up, that we become more aware again. Our conscious awareness expands back to what we truly are, that we're not a physical body. We're actually some kind of energetic representation of a life. It's like I see it as a bit like a game, that we are plugged into this game. We load ourselves into this game, and we play out through the game. And if you think of any game, if the game was a case of, like, I think we've talked about it before, but like Kong or something, where you can up and you try to jump over the barrels, and the Kong's throwing is it something in fire, barrels and fire he's sending down. Or Super Mario might be another example. If that game was just the case of that you just up the ladders, up the ladders, up the ladders, and got to the end, level 1 complete, up the ladders, up the ladders, up the ladders, level 2 complete, up the ladders, level 3. It was a boring game, and what's the point in even doing that? But the harder the challenges, the more that you're determined to beat that challenge, to get through that challenge, and the better you get at the game. And I see life as that, is that the more challenges that we go through, the stronger that we get, the more experience that we're gaining, and to the point where, I guess, you complete the game. And then as you complete the game, you could be the guide that then shows people how to navigate through their game, because you have learned you went through a lot of the challenges that they've went through. So this between life is really about, I guess, it's maybe the truer state. It's the state of what we are and who we are, and how we decide whether we come here to live this life, or whether we decide to go somewhere else, which is another interesting topic we could go into, but it doesn't always need to be Earth. But at the end of the day, we're all conscious beings experiencing, and through the experience, we're growing and learning and advancing to some state.
That's a beautiful explanation. And it explains a lot why, for example, people that have a fear of death and then they experience something like this, either through hypnosis or plant medicine or meditation or in any other way, they come out of that no longer fearing death. Because, like you said, it's not necessarily dying, it's just waking up or realizing that you're a soul having a human experience, you're this energetic being or spiritual being having a human experience and not the other way around. And when you realize that this life is not the end when it's over, then I think it frees up your mind to not worry about it anymore. Sure, it doesn't mean you want to die tomorrow, but it lets you live life more fully.
Yeah. When you look at the game analogy again, it's a bit like, imagine you're Super Mario and you're going along and then a ghost kills you. You don't go into absolute meltdown because your little character has died. You go back to the start and you start again and you figure out how to go past that ghost this time, and then you go on to the next bit. It doesn't mean that when we lose somebody or we should just still be sitting thinking, oh well, it's just a game, isn't it? You'll still feel that feeling. It's still there. And and it's more, and I think even that is actually a lost part of your life. That person might have meant something to you and contributed to your life. And what you're feeling is the loss of that contribution because it maybe helped you in certain ways. It made you feel certain ways. So it's more the loss that you'll feel through a bereavement or something. But from this perspective is that it's like we're plugged in to this matrix, this game, and at the end of it, we all return back to, it could be the soul family again, where that person that you lost, they could have probably lived about 100 lives with that same soul. And this is just one of the lives that you've lived with them.
Beautiful way to look at it. And you mentioned that one thing we can touch on is this idea of, well, the soul family, but also how you choose where to go. And it doesn't have to be on Earth, it can be somewhere else. What have you found in your...
Yeah, so again, let's say the word aliens. What is an alien? An alien is just another conscious being living its experience. We could be an alien. So this could be something that, again, so there's a whole concept as well that there is other beings from other places here helping this world because it's not the best place. So I guess we're trying to raise some sort of, elevate some kind of consciousness in this existence, this construct that we experience in, and there's help that happens. And some of these other beings come into this game and take a life, become a human, and live that life. But as that being, you may have had other experiences in other places as well. So again, this was one of the strange things that comes through some of these hypnotic sessions, is that you may find that you are also part of some other group, not human. Or it's an interesting time to be talking about this because there's so much now being revealed through, particularly in America, where they're now starting to talk about, okay, let's just say the aliens, UFOs, they're real, and they've covered a lot of this stuff up. So at this time now, it's becoming more acceptable that, and where institutions that have kept it quiet are now saying, okay, they're real things. So this is just another way then of understanding, well, if they exist, then what are they? And for me, it's just that there are other conscious beings that maybe aren't as restricted in the way that we are living in this existence, this earth experience. So some people might experience other worlds, other places, other groups of being that work in certain ways just for their own learnings, just as we are learning, or other times or other places. So one of the big common ones that a lot of people talk about is places like Lemuria and Atlantis. And I mean, even now there's a lot of people still searching for these places, and there's more and more things starting to come out that start to support these places that potentially existed, and how it can explain some of the unexplainable things, like the pyramids, for instance. How were they built? How is there pyramids in Mexico and pyramids over in Egypt? So there's so much unexplained stuff from our history that now seems to be starting to point toward more advanced beings that have existed that are responsible for this. And right away back to probably people like Edgar Cayce, who he was called the Sleeping Prophet. He was a guy, I don't even know when he was about, maybe the 30s, I'm guessing, but he was someone that was, through hypnosis, starting to give people answers to illness and information that they needed. But he spoke a lot about these ancient places. So again, it's another thing that happens sometimes, is the past life might not be 60 years ago. It could be 2,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, probably, actually. So these are the other interesting things that seem to come up through the sessions. I suppose one thing I should touch on is some people might say, well, is this all just imagination? Are we all making this up? One of the things I'd probably say is technically we are making it up. If I said to you, think about your last holiday, your last vacation, and you would go, okay, I was in, let's pick a place, I don't know, the Maldives. I was in the Maldives, a beautiful beach. And says, but you're just making that up in your mind. Yeah, technically I am. I'm trying to remember it. I'm not there. I'm not physically in the Maldives. So the mind is reconstructing these memories. To support it as well as there's a lot of people that, I mean, there's a really good set of documentaries called The Ghost Inside My Child, I think, that was on Prime for quite a while. Don't know if it's still on it, but that was all children given all these recalls of these past lives. They were going through sort of trouble sleeping, nightmares of crashing an airplane, and that documentary, the parents would start to look into who they say they are, the names, and start to find evidence of this in the past. There's even a guy, his name was Robert Snow. I think he was a captain of the Indianapolis Police Department, and he did a past life regression. And he started to talk about, I was like an artist, I think it was a guy, Carol Beckworth or something, I think the name was, which was this artist 100 years ago. And all the things that he said, there was something like 30 points that he said. So it was things like, I think whiskey was maybe the drink of the time, but this artist preferred wine. He walked with a walking stick. So there's all these points that he had. And out of something like 30, I can't remember the exact, but something like 30, 28 or something where they got right. And what he said was there's actually people go to jail with less evidence than what that I've got here that supports this past life regression sort of theory. And there's a lot of other stories similar. I've had people that have went searching this stuff. So in a way, we're trying to construct the memory. Even our own memories now, they're never accurate. If you think about someone that maybe asked about a car crash or something, two witnesses might give two completely different stories, and that's their perception of what happened. It's just what they saw. And there's another thing that I've heard is the best way to preserve a memory is never to remember it, because we're trying to reconstruct every time, and every time we reconstruct, we may distort it in some ways, and that's where memory becomes a bit subjective, because it's a recreation of what we're trying to recall from a previous perception.
That's a really good explanation there, Stephen. Love it, love it, love it. I do have one last question for you. And you also talk about something called future life progression, which is something I haven't heard much about. Can we dive a bit into that?
So there's a concept that there is no time. Time is a construct within this reality, but spiritually there is no time. So that from that perspective, then time technically doesn't exist from a spiritual way. People saying that time doesn't exist, I'll argue that and say, well, it does exist because it exists for us. We in a 3D world, and as a human experiencing time is linear for us, and that's how we kind of exist. We exist through cycles, the moon, the circling the earth, or us going around the sun, or that day and night. It's all cycles. So everything's about cycles, and I guess that's measurable by time. So future life progression, I guess, is from that happening simultaneously. So what the future life progression is doing then is to try and go forward rather than go back, to look forward into find out what is the likelihood of what we're trying to achieve here, what are the lessons. Now there is one aspect of that. So no life is predetermined completely. There's probably a framework or some idea of what it is that we want to learn and what paths we will choose as we move forward. We may take a completely different path. We might decide that we don't want to do that, and then we stall that path, that learning that we've came here to do. So no life is completely predetermined. There's maybe a framework of what it is that we can experience to learn. So future life progression for me would be, it's the potential. It's what our life might look like, or what it will look like if we follow a particular path. And it may show you that you could, if you make this choice now, you could be living a life in abundance of happiness. Or if you make this choice and it's not maybe within what you've planned to do, you may then have to go through some more difficulties until you can get to a point where you can make the right choice to get you to that better place. So that's future life progression. Really, it's just about going forward rather than going back. But again, it's basically the law of the universe for me is free will. We can choose to be anything we want to be. We are creator beings that create our reality. So there is an infinite number of things that we can do. Some paths will complement our goals for learning, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it, Stephen. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. Wow, we covered so many great topics here. It got me intrigued into digging deeper into some of these. So let's tell people where they can find more of your work, and if they want to connect with you to do a session, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I probably the most on something like Instagram. So I do a lot of posting on Instagram. A lot of it's comedy. There's a lot of spiritual comedy. There's a lot of people going through difficult lives, and humor is one of the best healers, I think. So I post a lot of funny spiritual memes and things. So I do a lot on. So people want to find me on Instagram. Message me if they want to do sessions on Instagram. They can go to my website as well and contact me through my website, which is just stephentowill.com. So they can find me through my website as well if they want to.
Yeah, and we'll put those in the show notes as well for people to have. So, Stephen, before I let you go for the day, is there anything else that you'd like to share or add that maybe we haven't touched upon?
Covered a lot. It's a reminder. And of all the sessions that I do, and I even got it in a session for myself a long time ago, we touched on it a second ago that we're creator beings. We can create our life. Now, one of the things I think is that we can become a bit disassociated from maybe what we are, who we are spiritually, everything else. And one of the things that I'm always reminded of is nature. So um, nature's not out there in the forests and the grass and the hills. We are part of nature. That is the natural creation of source, of God, whatever you want to call it. That, and with it being I guess, reconnecting, people do grounding, barefoot stuff, all of that, just even being among nature, hearing the birds, the sounds of the rivers, that's creation, and that's what we are. That's why we probably feel so at home in these types of places, because we're reminded that we are part of this overall creation. So I'd say that is a good little kind of reminder that nature will help us to really disconnect a little bit from the chaos of the world, the unnatural way that we live, and through the stresses, through even the cities that we live in. Again, we're cut off from nature. So I think nature's a big key thing that if we remember that, then it can help us a lot.
Yeah, that's a great reminder there, Stephen, and a great way to end the show. So thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of personal transformation. Your presence and engagement are at the heart of what we do, and I sincerely appreciate your time, and thirst for knowledge, inspiration, and empowerment. Please consider showing your support by hitting like, subscribe, leaving a comment, or writing a review. Your engagement not only fuels our mission, but also helps others discover these insights. For more daily guidance on personal transformation across the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical realms, be sure to visit our website at unleashthyself.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Unleash Thyself Today, TikTok and YouTube at Unleash Thyself, and there we post daily content designed to inspire and empower you on your journey. If you have any specific thoughts, questions, or feedback, I truly value your input. Or if you'd like to have a conversation with me or work with me, please feel free to email me directly at constantine@unleashthyself.com. I would love to hear from you. Together, we're building a community united in authenticity and purpose. Once again, thank you for being a part of this movement. Until next time, continue to embrace your true self and live a life on purpose, with purpose. See you in the next episode.